Hello. Oh, there we go. Welcome to Aydia Tipton's senior thesis presentation. Thank you all for being here. My name is Mrs. Keenest. Aydia has been my senior assistant in Algebra 2 this year. Joining me on the panel, we have Miss Martiz and Mr. Patterson. I'll pray and then we'll get started. Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for Aydia and for all the hard work and preparation that she's put into her thesis. I pray that this next hour would be honoring to that hard work and glorifying to you, Lord. I pray that you would just give her peace to calm any nerves she's feeling and wisdom and discernment to just share truth well. It's in your son's name I pray. Amen.
Okay, so bridging cultures, how understanding differences strengthens communities and careers. Throughout the course of your life, there will be many times when you run into people with a different culture than your own. These interactions can occur in many settings, including personal relationships, in the workplace, social interactions during school, and while providing or receiving care in medical fields. In these encounters, it is important to remember to be understanding and open to their culture. This idea can be described as cultural competence. Developing cultural competence can strengthen social bonds and promote community. Dr. Raina P. Miller defines cultural competence as the ability to understand and interact with people of different cultures. It can also be defined as a set of values, behaviors, attitudes, and practices that enable people to work effectively cross-culturally. These definitions share a common goal: fostering effective and respectful interactions across cultures. It is the ability to understand and interact well with those of a different cultural background. Understanding other cultures is key, not only to getting along with others, but to love one another as God calls us to do. Culture must first be clearly defined before exploring its significance. It is not merely understanding the arts, it is much more than that. It encompasses beliefs, social norms, religion, ethnicity, and everyday living. Merriam-Webster defines culture as the beliefs, customs, arts, etc. of a particular social group, place, or time. In addition to its broad definition, culture also plays a growing role in modern society. It is present in every aspect of our lives: our homes, our schools, our businesses, and our hospitals, and beyond. As stated in U.S. News and World Reports, nearly 70% of the country's largest cities are more racially diverse than they were in 2010. According to a U.S. News analysis of the most recently released population estimates data from the U.S. Census Bureau, a trend that experts expect to continue. This diversity is not a new concept to the United States. Throughout American history, immigrants from all over the world have been traveling to this country. With them, they have brought their cultures, traditions, and beliefs. Over time, everyone blended and created the diverse society we have today. Because culture is so widespread and embedded into daily life, it cannot simply be ignored or dismissed. Failure to recognize cultural differences results in frustration, confusion, distrust, dislike, and arguments. For society to thrive, it is essential to strengthen our communities and relationships. To do this requires understanding others, which includes their cultures. Across countries, there are different norms, beliefs, languages, economies, and more. If we choose to ignore these cultural differences, then we are harming our relationship with others. For example, in American culture, it's rude not to say thank you. We are taught from a young age to be respectful and say thank you, but in other cultures, it's considered rude to say thank you. Not to say that people need to overthink everything that they say or do, but instead be open and respectful to learning. Exploring and understanding cultural differences can lead to personal growth by challenging assumptions, developing empathy, and reducing stereotypes through the breakdown. Yeah. So, how does a person grow cultural understanding to carry out these ideas? That question is a difficult one to answer since there is no definitive method or way. One can never accomplish understanding every person's culture. There are far too many, and they are constantly growing. While it may be impractical to understand all, it is still possible to grow. The first step to this growth is to educate yourself. This can be done from researching articles, reading books, looking it up online, or talking to someone about it. The second step is to reflect on your own culture. Consider your background and beliefs and interpret how they have influenced your life. Give yourself time to go over what your family practices are, what your holidays look like, and what your norms are. Third is to engage with different cultures and groups. The best way to learn is from experience. One effective way to learn about a culture is talking to someone who is part of it about it. Participating in cultural events is the fourth step. To truly learn and gain an understanding is to immerse yourself in that culture. This can be done through engaging in festivals and celebrations. The fifth step is to learn that language. Learning language allows a person to gain insight and understanding into another culture. An example of this can be found in my interview with Dr. Young Whiting, who traveled to America from Korea for college. She learned English before she left Korea, but continued to grow her insight into American minds through watching drama movies and television shows. It gave her a view of how people express themselves and different ways communication works. Step 6 is traveling abroad. To understand the daily life and customs, what better way is there than traveling to that country? Developing empathy and having an open mind is the seventh step. The key to developing empathy is by respecting others and listening to cultural views, insights, and experiences. Lastly, the eighth step is to incorporate cultural awareness into your daily life. Being mindful of holidays, celebrations, diets, communication preferences, and more can help improve daily interactions. These steps are not an end-all solve-all. They are not perfect and they have their faults, but what does matter is they give a foundation for developing cultural competence. The main takeaway is being culturally aware is to be open-minded and to make an effort. In the book I read for this thesis, Cultural Competence, What It Is, Why It's Important, and How to Develop It, there were two main professions in which cultural competence should be practiced. These two are medicine and education. Everyone in the world will at some point need some kind of medical attention. This means that doctor and nurses see all kinds of people, no matter what their background, what language they speak, or what their beliefs are. A culturally competent healthcare system can promote better outcomes and quality of care. This can lead to the elimination of both racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. If a doctor does not follow this idea, then problems can occur. For example, Jehovah's Witnesses believe in the command to abstain from blood, and that God views blood as representing life, or their soul. Due to this, they don't take part in blood transfusions or donating in blood. This means doctors and nurses should be more careful when dealing with patients to avoid extra chaos and racial and ethnic disparities in the workplace. The healthcare system consists of majorities and minorities. Minorities have reported feeling their care was insufficient due to cultural and language barriers. Due to language barriers, some people will choose not to visit a healthcare provider to seek preventative care. This language divider leads to problems such as patient dissatisfaction, poor comprehension, and a lower quality of care. We are taught in government that all men are created equal and therefore should receive the same quality of care and respect, no matter what their background. To deliver quality treatment and attention, the provider must deliver individualized care. This includes practicing humility and cultural competence. Humility in this sense is meant to be intentional in honoring the beliefs, customs, and values a person has. Merging the idea of humility and cultural competence together creates a meaningful connection between doctor and patient, which will almost always bring about a positive or effective experience. If healthcare systems, providers, and workers can implement cultural competence and humility, then not only are they providing better service and care, but they are loving their neighbors well. God calls us to love Him, love others, and build a community with one another. When caring for a patient, you want to help them get better. This want for healing builds community with each other because we are actively wishing the other person well. The education system is also an area where both the curriculum and staff should be more culturally aware. Education brings about all types of people. Elementary school, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and colleges all bring about a diverse group of students. Students from all different backgrounds fill these institutions, which means schools should try to the best of their ability to accommodate them. It is essential to create an environment where learners from all backgrounds can feel valued and respected. Developing awareness enables educators to recognize, understand, and respond to their students' needs. It is necessary for every student in the classroom to feel respected. It is important that all involved in the student's education be able to communicate effectively with one another. Stated in an article, educators understanding a student's cultural background can communicate more effectively, facilitating meaningful idea exchanges. Such understanding also empowers teachers to develop curricula reflecting the pluralistic histories, values, and viewpoints of their learners, resulting in a richer educational experience. Once you understand a person's background, communication becomes easier and promotes better community. In my interview with Dr. Young Whiting, she described Korean education as very technical and traditional. In Korean classrooms, the students are told to just listen and take the teacher's word as truth. They are not to talk back or ask feedback or questions. Perfection is the goal in Korean education, and discipline is to be found in all foundations. Students lack the freedom to choose their own way. After experiencing American education, Dr. Whiting concluded that we leaned more toward creative aspect than just academic. She was allowed to create relationships with her teachers and peers in America, unlike Korea. After experiencing both cultures, Dr. Whiting evaluated both and came to the conclusion that both styles merged together would be beneficial for future generations. Another field of work where cultural competence is highly found is businesses. In many businesses, there might be a person who has grown up differently than others or is from a different culture. While this may be intimidating and pose many challenges, it also has shown to improve quality. Schiller International University stated that research on cultural intelligence continues to show that people with higher cultural intelligence experience less interpersonal conflict and collaborate more effectively in multicultural settings. Being open to learning and understanding a colleague's cultural background has shown to improve the workplace. Overall, when embracing cultural competence and actively seeking to understand diverse perspectives, businesses can create better positions for themselves. Taking the time to understand another person's background or culture can strengthen relationships, efficiency, and overall growth potential. A research report was done that stated when companies have more diverse leadership, they are more likely to outperform their competitors. This success did not appear by accident. It came from organizations that prioritize and value diverse perspectives and promote collaboration. A business would build trust quicker, work more effectively, and communicate more productively if they understood and respected the differences in language, customs, and communication styles. They are also in a better position to expand their businesses and create loyal customer relationships by meeting people's needs. Diverse teams also have the opportunity to bring fresh ideas, which leads to greater creativity, adaptability, and long-term growth. Therefore, cultural competence helps businesses operate more effectively due to strengthening both external and internal relationships. While exploring different fields and ways to grow, it is equally important to reflect on our everyday relationships, including our interactions, our friendships, and family life. How does being culturally competent help these areas, though? Well, it helps us grow and strengthen those relationships to their fullest potential. How can you really know someone without knowing their background, what drives them, where they're from? Investing into other people's lives and discovering who they are is an invigorating feeling. If we fail to see one another, how are we supposed to love each other well and build this community which God has called us to? When people engage in our lives and try to understand us, it's an invigorating feeling. Being understood is one of the biggest cravings that people have. By asking questions and wanting to know someone, we're feeding that craving. And who knows, maybe once you start learning about this culture, you will want to experience it for yourself. Building these relationships that start out on understanding cultures could lead to finding a lifelong friend. It could lead you to discover more about your own roots or wanting to experience more of life. No matter what the reason, just starting that conversation and engaging with a person who's different from you can lead your life down a new path. Being open and understanding are traits for successfully bridging cultures together. Although cultural competence is highly encouraged, some argue that it is unnecessary in everyday life. It can be assumed that treating everyone the same, regardless of cultural background, is the fair approach. Others might believe focusing too much on cultural differences could cause more complications in fast-paced environments. However, this way of thinking can lead to do more harm than good. When we ignore cultural differences, it can create misunderstandings, weaken communication, and lead to worsening of relationships. As discussed throughout the entirety of the speech, cultural competence is not about mastering every culture, but about being open-minded and willing to learn. By taking the time to understand others, individuals and organizations can build stronger interactions and trust, leading to better outcomes. Therefore, rather than being unnecessary, cultural competence is a crucial skill that enhances both professional and personal relationships. In conclusion, cultural competence is an essential skill that influences every aspect of our lives, from personal relationships to professional fields such as education, businesses, and healthcare. As our world continues to mix and places become diverse culturally, we need to adapt and increase our cultural intelligence. It is crucial to understand, respect, and interact with others, no matter what their background may be. By developing cultural competence, Not only does it reduce tension and conflict, but it strengthens communication, relationships, and long-term growth. Whether you are providing patient care, creating an inclusive curriculum or classroom, building a successful business, or forming meaningful connections, cultural awareness will play a pivotal role in encouraging unity and growth. By choosing to be open minded, empathetic, and willing to learn, we as individuals can contribute to building stronger relationships, communities, and loving others.
Aydia. This is the part that you were looking forward to. Welcome to the panel. Can you start by telling us what are your plans for next year?
My plans for next year I'm really excited about. So I'm attending Tarleton State University and I plan to major in business and minor in marketing and possibly international business as well. And then after I graduate there, go to cosmetology school.
Awesome. And you're starting your cultural competence of cowboy college by wearing your boots today.
Yep.
So,
Cowboy capital of the world.
okay. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose this topic for your thesis, why you're interested in it?
So one of my biggest goals in life is to travel the world. That has always been something that I've thought about and wanted to experience. And when looking at the places that I've wanted to go or visit, I see the festivals that they have, the celebrations that they do, and different things that they just have in their homes and different ways that they act. And it's always intrigued me, and I've always wanted to know more about it and maybe implement it in my future one day. And so when thinking about my senior thesis, which didn't know I was, it took me a really long time to figure it out. But when thinking about it, I wanted to include something that was important to me, and traveling was important to me. Learning about other cultures was important to me. And so that's why I chose the topic because I figured that God has all called us to build this community with one another. And in that, we're all made in his image, and but we all are different and we all have our different cultures. And I thought that doing my senior thesis over this would be a good idea.
I agree. What's one of like the top places that you want to travel to in the future? And what are some things that you've already learned about their culture just from research?
So there's so many. There's just so many that I want to go to. But uh one is one of the places I really want to go is Europe. But then also to give you like the best example is I want to go, this is not in Europe, but Russia. I really want to go to Russia, and a lot of people think it's weird, but I really like the way that they decorate like their cities. And also I'm a dancer myself, and so I really want to go see one of their Russian ballets because like that's something I'm passionate about. And I just really I want to go everywhere, like honestly. um but I haven't learned everything. Obviously, you can't learn everything, but what I've like seen in a bunch of the cultures and places I want to go looks just really warm and inviting, and like I would enjoy it.
Cool. I'm glad you clarified your geography knowledge. Russia's not
Yeah.
Europe. All right. So you mentioned that having cultural understanding helps us to love others as God calls us to. Um, just kind of the foundation of that, how would you describe how God calls us to love others?
God calls us, so we're all built in his image and we are all created to have community with one another because we are not meant to live this life alone. That can be seen from when God created Adam and he was all alone, so he created Eve. That's, I feel like, the first place where we see that we need to like be around each other and like love one another. And I think that in, wait, can you repeat your question? Sorry, I got lost.
I just asked, how does God call us to love others?
And I think starting from there, he calls us to love one another by being open to who they are and not just being closed off to their ideas, what their beliefs are, but instead to engage in their lives no matter who they are, no matter what they've done, and just love them because that's ultimately his plan for all of us is to love others and to love him.
Awesome. When you say us, like he calls us to love others this way. Who is this us that you're talking about?
Everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he calls believers and non-believers to love that
Yes.
way.
I absolutely believe that just because somebody's an unbeliever doesn't mean that you shouldn't love them.
But should they also love in this way? They
I
don't believe in
mean,
God.
even without believing in God, I think that a non believer loves, like, maybe not in the way that we were taught in Greek, like the agape kind of love for one another, but I still think that they believe that it's important to love one another, foster friendships and families, and actively pursue relationships with others.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that. I was just, I don't know, kind of wondering and thinking like, is this cultural competence should this be like a character trait of believers that's different from the world, because of how God has called us to love others, or is that just kind of across the board?
I think it's
Everyone
across the
should
board.
pursue this.
Yeah, I think it's just across the board. Everyone should pursue it because honestly, I just think it helps in all aspects of life, no matter if you're a believer or an unbeliever.
Awesome. Do you think Jesus, when he lived as a man, um, in his life and ministry on earth, did he demonstrate cultural competence?
Absolutely. One example that comes to mind is when he was at the well and the Samaritan woman was there. He didn't just ignore her, not talk to her, engage with her because she was a different culture and like what she did and everything like that. But instead, he chose to teach to her and help her. And I think he did that throughout all his life on earth, is that he wanted to be there for everybody. And ultimately, he died on the cross for everyone, not just certain races or certain cultures, but for everyone.
That's a great example and great explanation. Um, this one, I don't know, this could be kind of hard, but
Okay.
just something I've been wondering about and thinking about your topic is, do you think in heaven cultural competence will just come naturally to us? Like we won't have to, there won't be like a barrier?
That is a hard question. Um, I don't think there will be a barrier. I think that when and we're all in heaven is just easy and there's no difficulties, there's no anything. So I feel like in heaven we are perfect. And so we already have that kind of like in us.
Cool. I hope that's true. Okay, go ahead and pass it to Miss Martinez.
Hello. Okay. I just wanted to start off and just praise you for the way that you structured your thesis. I think it's very clear in the way that you define culture and then taking us through like the certain steps of ways that we can grow in understanding culture and then taking that into the workplace. I just personally, I just really enjoyed reading and hearing you talk about that because it was for me very simple to follow. And so, um, kind of pigging off of what you were saying about like wanting to know Russian culture.
Mhm.
Is there like a certain Russian cultural stereotype that you hope to grow in understanding when growing in knowledge of Russian culture? Because you kind of talk about how there's cultural stereotypes within different cultures. And so specifically in Russian culture, a
Mhm.
culture that you want to know more about, is there something that you want to grow in understanding?
I think when I think of like Russian, like what other people think of is that when they're looking at like the people, they see kind of like more aggressive, more like rude in a sense type people that are just very like kind of like angry a lot. And I think that's like something that goes into people's minds, goes into mine. But like I just like want to go and see if like that's like if they are seeing that as well, like if they're like that, or if it's just different because of who's around, like the countries that are around, like what their practices are, what their social norms are, everything like that. I want to see if like that's actually we're just not understanding something on like our side and that's normal over there and it's not actually an anger or anything like that, but it's something different.
Just like a different way of communicating
Mhm.
with one another. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so moving into just the steps that you were talking about at the beginning, something that really stuck out to me was your first step, researching culture, and then your fourth step talking about just like the festivals and like understanding just festivals. And so those two steps, it reminded me of our Spanish class, which I can give you a second to
Okay,
find.
sorry.
No, it's okay. Of Spanish in the way that do you remember the project of how everybody got the opportunity to research the culture for one country?
Mhm.
And throughout all of Central and South America, a part of the project was to research festivals. And so what was something that was common about all the countries when it came to celebrating? Do you remember?
They all, I remember they just all had so much dancing, and food was a big one. Like, food, I 100% believe brings people together, and they all, like, all the countries were different in their own way, but they all still, like, incorporated some of the same things. So, something that I really remember is that they all were very about, like, color, a bunch of bright, like, just color, and then just all their dancing styles. And then I remember for mine that I don't remember what it was for, but they did like water balloon fights and like in the city streets and everything like that. But I think kind of something that they all had in common was that like the food and the dancing and the colors.
Yeah, yeah. And also just the similarity of they all had some sort of celebration. This happened in Central America and South America. It happens to be um the weekend before Ash Wednesday, and that's I think the
Yeah.
carnival that you're talking
Hmm.
about. Yeah. And how I like you said, everyone was uniquely different, but yet they're celebrating
Hmm.
something. And so I think that it's interesting that that's just a way that culture plays out, just right under us.
Hmm.
And so kind of moving on to that seventh step, you talk about developing empathy.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit on what you mean by developing empathy for others.
I think what I meant by that is that if we're all just like kind of closed-minded and like not looking into others and like we're kind of just like self-focused and like we don't have that innate kind of like you see someone like kind of like just like sad or like happy or something like that, like you see their emotions. And I just think that if you're not looking at those and you're only like caught up in yourself, then you can't understand that culture because you're too wrapped up in like what you're thinking or yourself rather than what's going on in that culture that you're supposed to be around. So I think by developing like kind of that awareness to like see what this person is thinking, kind of like looking around and seeing like what their emotions are if it's at that festival or that celebration or something. I think that's important so that we can develop because I don't think without empathy that we can truly know like and understand a culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I also feel like that's just expanding on perspective, just even as an individual, beyond culture.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna go into just the healthcare of portion of what you were talking about. And so you brought up this example of Jehovah's Witness, and how patients, a patient that's a Jehovah Witness would be needed to attend to differently. And so how do you think that healthcare providers can provide the optimum care for patients with restrictions based on their beliefs, um, and what they're trained to do? So how do you think that a healthcare provider could um, give this patients optimum care? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Sorry, just a second. So in my book, they talked about different examples and like ways that different cultures do like act in hospitals and things like that. And I think for a doctor, their first priority should be doctors and nurses should be to help that person. But I think especially like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff like that, they don't want that blood transfusion and they don't want to donate blood. And I do think that that doctor will have to care for them differently because of their belief. And so I feel like a way to go about that is to really, and it also kind of depends on the severity of the situation. If it's like an immediate situation, then I think you really have to make them see that they're trying to help you in the best way and give them options and have them ultimately choose. But whatever the option the doctor thinks is best, really try and sell that one. Not necessarily sell, but like, and not push it either, because you don't want to push it onto somebody, but like really explain the significance and the importance of that option as being the best. So, but ultimately, I think it's up to the patient to decide what they want. And if they don't have the ability, then talking to the family about it. But I think that but doctors also need to be open and listening to what their patient is saying. And so I think it's just a two-way street of really just like listening to one another.
That's good. And also, I like how you said of just like for the doctor to be able to be open-minded in bringing different options, but also encouraging the option that the doctor sees fits best with the patient's condition. That's really good. And so how can quality care be provided when there is a language barrier specifically? How would you say?
Quality care with a language barrier. I mean, in a hospital, I believe there should be interpreters both for language and also for ASL, like in like hearing impaired. I think that there should be somebody there that can help them with that, but there might be situations where there's a lot going on and they might not be able to make it. And I just think that it also depends on the severity of the situation as well, still. But if it's a less severe situation, maybe taking time until that interpreter can arise or trying a different way to figure it out. Like if they have a family member who maybe can, like, let's say that it's like Spanish, like you don't know Spanish, but the family member might know a little bit of English or something like that, and you might be able to interpret like kind of that way, or just using like body language in your hands or things like that. I think you can always find a way. I think it does make it more difficult, and I know that hospitals are crazy busy and there might always be the best solution, but to just try your best.
That's good. Um, and so kind of going off of that, also within the patients, the importance of creating cultural competence that takes humility, right? Um, that takes the healthcare providers to slow down and realize how they can care for their patients. What are some like tangible ways that you think healthcare providers could do this?
To like improve the quality of care.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but like just really listening to that person and not just being, because the doctor is crazy busy having to go from one place to another. But when you step into that room, clear your mind of your other patients and focus on this patient in front of you, and just really just be don't be closed off to what they're saying and their pain level and things like that. I think they get so busy and so wrapped up in everything that they have to do that they forget about that part. And so I think to deliver like the best quality care is really just to be attentive and listening and close your brain off to everything else and just focus on the person in front of you. I think that can be true in all kind of aspects of life, but also with the quality of care, it's just treat them how you would want to be treated if you were in their position as well.
That's good. Um, okay, moving on to education. Um, here it's classical education, and so how do you think that how would you describe classical education's cultural competence?
I feel like for classical education, it kind of gives us a background into culture in a sense, because I think we are in like Greece and Rome history and American history and all the things like that. I think it does take you back there, and it does like kind of go over some cultural aspects in that in the classical education. And then also just based off of like the Bible classes that we've had, and also just like taking Greek, I feel like for the classical education, like those values and those things that are added into it are also teaching about cultural competence a little bit. Maybe not to the fullest, broadest extent as you can, but I feel like you can always pick little bits of it out in like any of the aspects.
I'd agree with that, yeah. Um, and so also with education, you kind of talked about how schools should accommodate to different cultures. And so, do you think that that's something that should be in the classroom, like classroom material, or that should be something outside the classroom, like socially, or both?
Um, I think like when I was saying that, it's really hard depending on how many different cultures that you have in that classroom, but I do think that the curriculum mainly should be um, adding that aspect of culture in it instead of rather than just teaching your culture or that place that you're in, go over like different countries and different things that they do and everything like that. And I think including it in the curriculum is more important so that that student feels like, oh, okay, I'm important too. My culture is important as well. And like people learn about it. But outside of the classroom, I think that's more difficult for a school. And so I think it's kind of up to that person to have it outside of the classroom.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And so I have a question that also um kind of expands on the question that Ms. Keenest asked about loving others. And so this question fits within all different work environments, but specifically business. You know, it's a fast-paced environment, a fast-paced workplace. And so as a believer, because hopefully one day you'll be in the business realm from what you explained earlier of what you want to do. So as a believer, what's something how can you take the time to understand your coworkers' backgrounds? Because that's something that you talked about too, of like understanding your coworkers versus just accepting who they are and what they bring to the table and moving on. So how could, in a fast-paced environment as a believer, how could you take the time to understand one person?
Okay. So for me, like I want a business one day, and what I really want to implement is the taking the time to do like a work retreat or something, either before or after or sometime during the year. I think that that's a good way to like kind of like get kind of like how we do retreat here is kind of the sense that I had is that you just take everybody out of the workplace and just have everybody be in community with one another, talk to each other, engage in activities. But like for in the workplace in the day to day is just like maybe going out to lunch with a coworker and just when you're getting to know them rather than just focusing on work, maybe take that lunch break to be like, okay, let's see, how did you grow up? Like what'd you go to college for? Or who were your best friends? Or what kind of animals did you have? Or just things like that. Taking the time to really understand your coworkers and not just being like, okay, I accept you for who you are. I think in order to understand and fully accept somebody, you have to know who they are.
That's great. Okay, I have so many more questions, but I'm gonna pass the mic.
You made it. All right. So you've been thinking, or so far what we've been talking about has been kind of global, like other cultures, other countries. How do we deal with our workplace or maybe at the classroom? I want to kind of think more America.
Okay.
Okay. Would you say that we as a country are unified or divided?
I say right now we're more divided than we are unified right now. But I think it's also in the sense of like what aspect we're looking at. Just are we looking at it from personal, like relationship wise with one another? Are we looking at it politically wise, or like what way you're looking at it? But if I'm looking at it like politically wise, I would say divided. But I feel we're also, depending where you are, also it can be more united. Like if that makes sense.
Sure. So how do you think we got here to where we are in America in terms of this division, whether politically or culturally? Because I kind of mix it all in together into one when you start to talk about culture in my mind. Um, how did we get here? How did we get so divided?
I think in the beginning, it was when like traveling to America for the first time, it was they wanted to get away from the church and everything like that. And so they came here to be able to express their freedom. But I feel like now there's more popping up, like more things like ethnicity and um what's the word I'm looking for? It's blanking from me right now. Oh, but like genders and like who your partner is and everything like that. I feel like with our freedoms, we've gone from that really shelter that they had to like really exploring, like really going in deep into everything. And I feel like along the way that has caused us to like divide from one another, because instead of rather than just hearing somebody say that and be like, okay, I accept that, some people would rather fight that and be like, no, you're wrong. And so I feel like that's how we've gotten to like this division.
Sure. At the beginning of our country, the motto that was printed on all our money is still there. And some of it is said, E pluribus unum. Do you know what that means?
Nope.
Okay. It means out of many, one.
Mhm.
Okay. So what do you think the founding fathers of our country had in mind with that idea?
I think what they had in mind is that everybody's coming from everywhere, and that when they come here, we all just need to combine together and create this unified country together, including all different cultures and aspects, and just making our own and being who we all are.
Right. And I'm not saying that those cultures should disappear and go away. Right. I'm not saying that, because I think that there's value in knowing where people come from. I think everybody brings a different story to the table. Even in this room, I think we all bring different stories to the table based on the culture of our home or the culture of our church or our friend group. What must we remember if we're really divided? What must we remember about the other people in order to try to bring it back together?
That they are unique and God made them in the image of Him, and that we are all created equal, and that just no matter any of the aspects, that you just to accept that person.
Right. Because I think back, I think through, well, you know me, I'm a huge nerd, right? And so I think back through the history of just our own country, just in our perceptions of each other in America, and then our perceptions of other people through the different things that we've encountered through the wartime and stuff like that. How do you think in America today, how can we overcome these misunderstandings or the mistreatment of other people groups through our time, or the misrepresentation, maybe through the social media or propaganda or things like that? How can we overcome that to try to bring things back together?
I think that's a hard question, honestly. But and I don't think it's possible to go back and get that perfect again, because of just how much time has changed, how much technology we have today, and everything like that. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible on Earth to be able to get to that point. I think in heaven we will be able to have that unified sense. But on Earth, I think there are ways to grow and maybe try and get like try our best to get to that goal, not the full like, but making it better than it is. And I think like ways to do that are just, I think people are very closed-minded, and they are also very set in their own ways, and instead of actually actively listening to another person and what they're saying, instead we're just like, no, you're wrong, it's my opinion's what matters, like I have, as Mr. Russell likes to say, the right opinion and like the true like opinion. And so I think that instead of thinking in that closed-mindedness, we should just really just open ourselves up and listen. Like I think Americans and everybody especially just doesn't listen. I think we need to turn our ears on a little bit more.
I agree. I agree completely. You've really caused me to think a lot, just in reading through your paper and just thinking through just my own thoughts, my own mindset. I'll just be honest. When I read through your paper, when you got to the counter arguments, I was like, oh no, those are my thoughts. Uh-oh. And so I've really had to sit and think a lot about this. And last night, as we were walking our dogs, Mrs. Patterson and I were talking about just this idea of cultural competency. And she brought up a young lady named Annika, who is one of, I won't go through the whole story to get to who she is, but she's friends with our friend's daughter. She's from South Africa. She's running track at Lubbock Christian University right now. And we just got to talking about the fact that I think sometimes we forget that people around the world don't do things exactly the way we do. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, Annika's parents obviously did not come to America for Thanksgiving, and she did not go home for Thanksgiving. Why not?
Because it's really hard to get that plane ticket there and back, and then everything that's happening there, rather than just here. It's a different world.
That's part of it, but they also don't celebrate Thanksgiving in South Africa.
Oh,
It's an American thing, right? And so it just kind of, it was like, oh yeah, you're right. And so it just this idea of people from other countries coming and other culture groups coming to be a part of here is like they may not necessarily do things exactly the way we do them. And I think there are times where we forget. I know I do. And I just forget, oh, you mean you don't live life the same way I do? That's weird. And so it's really caused me to have to stop and really kind of think. I really wish though that you would have made me think about this before, because Mrs. Patterson has been to Hungary and to Greece on mission trips. And she doesn't take the time to understand like the money exchange. And so we've probably spent way too much on stuff because she goes to the table and just goes, I don't know what I'm supposed to give you. Just take what I owe you.
Uh-oh.
Just hoping that the person's really honest. So it would have been nice to think about this before. So anyway, I've got a lot of other things I'd like to visit with you, but because of time, I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Kay.
All right, it's actually your turn, Aydia, to ask us a question.
Okay. I have an individual question for all of you. So how do y'all want me to go about that? Just ask them all and then y'all think? Okay. So for Mrs. Keenest, over the years and all the students that you've had in the classroom, how has interacting with all of them changed you as a person or made you think differently? And then for Miss Martiz, just based off of Spanish and everything like that, and then your plans. I hear like you're really well traveled, like you like experience a lot. And then from these like places that you visited and like from the cultures, like things that you've like seen or heard, or the way you've interacted with people, how has that affected like your life here, or has it affected it? And then for Mr. Patterson, how have students in the classroom throughout all the years, no matter where you've taught, have they ever changed your perspective on something important?
The first thing that came to mind was, I mean, I could probably think of something better if I keep thinking about it, but first thought is just that my students remind me a lot just to not take everything so seriously and just to be willing to be goofy and have fun
Yeah,
in life, which
Yeah.
is always a great reminder.
that's awesome. Yes.
Thank you for the compliments. I would say that growing up, my family is from Panama, and so I've had the opportunity and the blessing to grow up in a way where we highly value our culture that is very different than an American culture. And so I think as I've gone about living, like I've gotten to experience American culture through relationships. And an example of this is one of my best friends growing up. She invited me to a Super Bowl party one time, and it was the first time that I've ever been to a Super Bowl party, and it was the first time that um, a family invited me into their house to watch American football. That's something that like in my household we never did. And so going to that Super Bowl party, it opened my eyes to a culture that is so prominent in here in the United States that in my household, even living in the United States, wasn't. And so getting to experience that, and also, oh, it's just like my really good friend, like she just wants me to come and hang out with her family and experience this really exciting 2 hours with their family. And so I think that that's just something that's really shaped my understanding of people, is just getting to step into the perspective of different people that are different from me and the different from my family in just small ways. I think that relationally, that's just really been something that I really enjoy doing, and I guess has shaped me as a person. So yeah.
Embarrassingly, I think that early in my career, I don't think I really paid that much attention to my students' perspective. I taught band, and band is very much a world of expert-driven. You don't have an opinion on how it's supposed to sound because I'm the expert, so just sit down and do what I say.
Yeah.
Right? The concept of collaboration in my band room was non-existent. But over time, as I've matured as a person, and I've realized that that was not the right way to do things, I'm challenged by my students every day to sit down and say, have they changed my perspective on something important? The answer is yes, but trying to think of like something specific, particular moment, I don't know if I really can, because like I said just a minute ago, even this thesis project has caused me to sit down and think, am I thinking about this in the right way? And everything, like every conversation I have in a classroom, outside the classroom, in my office, walking to class, on the baseball field, in the van on the way to again, every conversation I have with kids through the last several years has challenged me to think about the way I think about things and try to think, what about what I think already is right or needs to be looked at again? Or I've really gotten to the point that what I believe about myself is I don't know everything. And I started my career thinking I knew everything. And it's really, really humbling to sit back and to talk to people like you and all these guys right over here and everywhere else. At a place like this, it's really challenging to be a teacher because you guys come into the classroom on a daily basis, really, really challenging me of like, oh my gosh, am I smart enough to teach here? The answer is probably no, but thankfully they still let me. Have you changed my perspective on many, 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 many things? The answer is yes. Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
All right. You made it.
Thank
We're going to
goodness.
pray first. So let's close in prayer and then we'll let the celebrations begin. Father, we're just so thankful for this time, God. And I just want to say a special thanks to you for the blessing that Aydia is in all of our lives. God, she's a bundle of energy and sass in all the right ways. And God, we love her, and we're just so thankful for the opportunity to have been a part of her life journey that you've allowed us to be. God, as she goes forward into her next bit of life, I pray that you'll just protect her. I pray that you'll help her to keep her head on straight perspectives and just chasing to you and what you would have her do in her life, Lord. God, we love you, and it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.